As if on time, my light just died, like right now. On time, as always. Hello, welcome to Web of Stories. My name is Melinda, and I am here with my weekly wrap-up. And what a week it has been. I'm sorry, I just like this chunk of hair. It's just driving me crazy. Anyway, it's been a week in my life. So, I watched almost all of the DNC, not Wednesday night, because Wednesday night I took my daughter's Girl Scout troop out to do a service project. So I think that was pretty legit reason to miss, although I came back and I watched Wallace's speech. But other things that are going on is, what time is it? As of 4 minutes ago, it's 12:04 on Friday. So my husband has been having to make a professional decision. I'm not going to go into details, but a professional decision that's a big one, and he had to make it by 4 minutes ago today. And he has been back and forth and doing everything, and it affects our family. So I've been on the decision too. So that's where my brain has been for most of the week. But he has made the decision. It's not the decision most people told him to make, but it's the one that's right for our family. So there you go. It's all good. It's all good. I just bring that up because I've got some reading stuff going on. I will get to my reading. I actually finished a fair amount this week, but I'll get to that. But I'm feeling very stressed about my reading at the moment. As you know, I am a book polygamist. I have too many books going on, and this is one of those points where that kind of hits me, and I feel stressed because I have so many books going on. But also I have to finish this. I have 3 things left. 2 are in progress. 1 is starting on Sunday, and 1 I'm waiting for my library hold to come in. And if it doesn't, I'm going to have to read manga. This is the way it is. So I have that going on, and we're getting towards the end of August. And also my postal book group, I have that book, and my book came to me really late, like 2 weeks before I had to send it on. So I have to kind of push through to read that so I don't hold the next person up. Fortunately, it's a book I actually owned, so it was already on my Kobo. So at least I'm knocking off an owned book by reading it. I won't go into it right now, but it's just, I'm feeling very stressed with reading right now. And yeah, I think I need to kind of in September, I have a couple buddy reads going, which are great. But I'm going to really kind of just, try to bring down the number of books I'm reading a bit, which will make sense. 2 of the books I have going, like, they aren't books I'm going to replace once I finish reading. One is my Tribal Histories of the Willamette Valley, which is for this, and the other is my Historathon book. So, once I finish those, that's fewer books. So yeah, I'm just feeling a little stressed about reading today or this week, but that is life, and it is actually a problem of my own making. But yeah, and I haven't been reading as much this week because I've been thinking about this thing that this big decision my husband has had to make, and then I've been watching the DNC, which sometimes I realize there's value in just chilling out in front of the television. I don't do that very often because I don't watch a lot of television, but this one. And by the way, in case anyone's wondering, I stream it on C-SPAN. I don't want any commentators telling me what I'm watching, so I just stream it on C-SPAN. Anyway, so that is my week. Tomorrow I get to do another Girl Scout thing, so I'll be gone for a bunch tomorrow, which is less reading time, but that's okay. That's okay. And the kids have next week off still because we're in Oregon and we are I think the last district in Oregon, or one of the few of the last districts in Oregon that start school this late. But they have all of next week off, and then they go back the following Thursday, which is a weird day to start school, but I don't question it. I just don't. I did have my daughter's back to school night this week. She knew she was going to have a messed up schedule, and she did. And so I said, well, let's get there right at 4 because it started at 4. I said, we're going to go to the counselor's office because it was really for people who needed to register, but I'm going to say, let's see if we can get in and see if they can get you to change your schedule. So we were able to do that. And apparently right after that, they said no more schedule changes. So she did get her schedule straightened out, and that's a lot off her shoulders and mine too. So yeah. So anyway, that is what's going on in my week. my husband's decision has been made, so we're kind of, okay, we're good. The decision is basically not to change anything at this point, so we're fine. It's fine. It's not a big deal. It just was a really big decision for us to make, and it took a lot of discussion and thinking, and that's kind of what was going on this week. All that being said, I finished 5 books this week. Now, I know I just said that I haven't been reading a lot this week, but, well, let's go through it. The first book I had actually been reading for a while, and this was my disabled author / protagonist. And I read, actually, that's the second book I finished, but that's okay. I read The Heart Principle by Helen Hoang. I've had this book on my shelf for a long time, book of the month. I'd read her first 2 books, which are, I have to look up the titles. One's The Bride Test, I think. Where is it? The Kiss Quotient and The Bride Test. And I liked them. I'm just not really in a romance mood for it. And I had also heard that people were complaining that this wasn't a romance really, which I have something to say about that. So the reason people said they didn't think this was a romance is because it's not a happy book. And I think that you kind of need to be careful about that, because the thing that makes a romance is an HEA, or a happily ever after, or an NFN, which isn't, or HFN, happy for now, which basically means that the 2 romantic characters need to be happily ever after or happily for now. Doesn't mean the book has to be happy. There's a lot of really sad stuff in this book. And I think people thought, well, that's not a romance then. Well, no, romances don't have to be happy. They just have to have a happily ever after. It's a romance. Okay, I'm sorry. There's a happily ever after. But no, it was good. It was very stressful because it was a very accurate portrayal. Helen Hoang is on the autism spectrum. She was diagnosed as an adult, and her characters tend to be autistic. And there is a character in here who is diagnosed as an adult, as being on the autism spectrum. And so it's dealing with that. And then she's got a lot of stress in her family that's going on. And so, yeah, it's not like a happy, like, go lucky romance, but it's still a nice romance. Not perfect. What did I end up giving this? I already forgot what I gave it. I gave this a B+. My issue with it was the pacing was kind of off on it. Like, yeah, the pacing felt like the way the different things that happen and that you have in a book, like the ritual death of the blah, 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 they happened in like not the place where they should, and the pacing was a little bit strange. It was still enjoyable. So yeah, it just wasn't, I don't think it's her best, honestly. But it's still pretty good. So there you go. And then this is actually the first book I finished. And I actually liked this book more than I thought I would, which is kind of strange when you think of what it is. And this was my Pacific Northwest author book. And that is The Plover by Brian Doyle. So this is not really a sequel, but follow-up to my favorite book, Mink River. So you're like, why would you not like this? I'm not saying I wouldn't like it, but the premise of it, I wasn't sure really appealed to me. And I can't really, well, I'm going to talk about this in very, very vague terms, because if I get too specific, it's going to spoil one of the storylines in Mink River. But this is like a maritime adventure novel. And that doesn't appeal to me when you say maritime adventure novel. That's not something that appeals to me. But I ended up loving this book. Mink River still has the place in my heart, but this was a 5-star book for me. Yes. I don't want to, there's found family, I don't want to get into because again, I don't want to spoil anything in Mink River. It's not really a sequel. So here's the deal. You don't need to read Mink River before reading this book. It gives you what you need for Mink River to contextualize what's going on here, and not in a way that you sometimes get where they kind of like on last week's episode or on the book previous and they rehash everything. He does it really well. So it doesn't feel like that. If I were to have just picked this up, I would not know that there was another book. However, I do actually kind of recommend reading Mink River first, because Brian Doyle, I don't want to call it magical realism because I don't think it's magical realism. It's like Brian Doyle, what his worldview was. And I think you ease into it. I don't even know if that's a way to put it. I think it's a better introduction in Mink River than it is here. So I do think if you never read Mink River and you pick this up, you might go, wow, this is weird. This is weird. But if you've read Mink River, it'll make sense. And I do think if you read Mink River, you're going to want to read this one. Because the storyline that this continues is one that's left in a very ambiguous way in Mink River. So you will want to read this after you read Mink River. It's just not necessary to read Mink River before reading this. I just think you should. So there you go. But I loved it. Brian Doyle. Yes, I have more of his books to read, but yeah, this was just a wonderful book. There's a character in it, and I can talk a little about this because this doesn't go back to Mink River, but there is a character in it that is a little girl who had suffered an accident, and she was sort of in a shell after that. She was nonverbal and all this, and I have a member of my family, a little girl in my family, who, it wasn't an accident, it was a genetic condition, but the same thing. So that was just really heartening to read, but I loved it. Loved the Plover. Okay, the next three are all ebooks, so yeah, they're gonna be here. And again, I'm gonna read this out of order, which will make sense. So the first one I finished, I want a gold star. I want a gold star. I finished As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. I felt like such a moron reading this book. I'm so glad I did it with Faulkner in August. I wasn't super active on the Voxer group, but I did read it. And it was a very active Voxer group, but I did read it and it really helped me. And I think by the end of the book, I was kind of getting it a bit more, but it was a hard book to read. But it's also a book I realize I'm going to read again. At some point, I'm going to read this book again. And I don't think it's a book you can or even should read just once. I did get the Spark Notes, or I downloaded it or looked it up online, the Spark Notes for it, which did help, especially at the beginning to kind of get you going. But it's a hard book. It's a college level book. Let's just put it that way. But I think it's important to, push yourself, push your boundaries and try things and challenge yourself. So I'm glad I read it, even though it was really, really hard. I might do Faulkner in August next year, but we'll see. So the last two books I read and are both by the theme of this week, which is William Kent Krueger. So the first book of his that I finished this week, read and finished this week, was The Devil's Bed. So in my video that I did Tuesday, the Let Me Introduce You video, I talked about this and I said I wasn't going to talk about my thoughts because I was going to do it today. So there you go. This is a book that he wrote in 2003, so pretty early on. I think he started the Cork O'Connor book, the Cork O'Connor series, in 1994, and Ordinary Grace was published in 2013. So this is 10 years before Ordinary Grace. And I don't know for sure if he meant it, his intention was to create another series. It felt like that. It felt like it was an intention to create another series, that it just didn't take off. But it's a political thriller, and the hero, I guess, it's really weird because if you read the Cork O'Connor series, or pretty much any mystery series that has like a central detective or person in a detective-like role, they're in the story a lot. Like the story kind of like, they're sort of the central to the story. And in this book, Bo Thorson isn't necessarily, which was a little bit weird. But whatever. So anyway, he works for the CIA or Secret Service, but he's in Minnesota. And the First Lady of the United States, who is the daughter of a former vice president, is from Minnesota. And the former vice president lives in Minnesota, and they're going to have something there, and he gets hired for security. But then the former vice president has an accident. And it's a whole thing. It goes off from there. Thriller-wise, plot-wise, it was pretty good. I will say it was good. It had good pacing. There was a good plot, well-constructed plot. It is not my issue with it, and this is one of those unfair issues, is it was a William Kent Krueger book. And I gave it a B, but it's my least favorite William Kent Krueger book. Things that I look for in a William Kent Krueger book aren't in this book. They just aren't. This is much more plotty and it's more like really early Cork O'Connor, where it is more thrillery. But yes, but this is also a lot grittier. There's two different references. There's two different sort of plot threads that include something that starts with in and ends with cest, which was not fun to read. One of them was really just sort of a mention thing, but the other one I just didn't really want to read that. There's also an instance of torture at the beginning that involves a guy without pants and jumper cables. So it's not what I expect from William Ken Krueger, and that's okay. He tried something new, didn't continue with it. Bo Thorson, who is the detective guy in this book, does show up in a later Cork O'Connor book, and I think I'd have to go back and look at the book, but I think the First Lady does too. Who knows? It was an entertaining read, but yeah, not my favorite William Ken Krueger, but that's okay. That is okay. I'm fine with that. I have now read, total like outtake. I just checked my comments from, well, it was actually my post that came out yesterday. No, it was my comments from the Let Me Introduce You To post. Someone commented about getting a copy of 10,000 Lakes. It was commenter Crean, I'm sorry, however you pronounce your name. My sister-in-law's name is Crean, so I always default to that, but I think it's probably Crean. Anyway, she recommended, I don't know why I didn't think about this, In Her Library Alone. So as soon as I read her comment, which I have yet to respond to, I put 10,000 Lakes on In Her Library Alone, so hopefully I will be reading it soon. Anyway, then I will be a completist. But yeah, so, writers sometimes try something new and it doesn't always work, and I think that's what this was. Now, the next book I read, which I read in less than 24 hours, was William Ken Krueger's newest book, which is Spirit Crossing. This is number 20 in the Cork O'Connor series. So this one, now the Cork O'Connor series has basically followed his family. It follows him and follows his family. So his kids have grown up with us. I feel like I've grown up with his kids. So I feel a real attachment to them. And he has a grandchild now. I mean, he's had the grandchild for a couple books now, but the grandchild plays a part in this book. And his grandchild is actually adopted. He is an Indigenous child. Cork O'Connor himself is part Indigenous, and his daughter adopted this Indigenous child that had been kidnapped. That's a whole book. But anyway, his name's Wabu. So they call him Wabu, which means little rabbit. And this is how it starts. They're going to take Cork O'Connor and people, I think his son-in-law, and they're going to take Wabu blueberry picking. And they go to one place and the tourists have taken over the blueberries. But then like, Cork goes, you know what? I know this other blueberry patch because I did some work for this guy who kind of lives off the grid. He died a couple years ago, but he paid me in blueberries because he paid him in blueberries. And he says he has a secret patch that's guarded by gnomes. So they go out to this guy's house, which is out there, and they find the gnomes, and they kind of go down to go find the blueberry, and all of a sudden they kind of hear Wabu talking to someone, and then Wabu comes back and he says, oh, the young lady's really sad and all this, and they're like, what's going on? So they go over there and they see a grave, basically. So Wabu's having some talking with spirits, and at this point I just want to step aside and say, this is, to me, not supernatural. I'm not saying this is not about my beliefs. This, to me, I don't consider supernatural because William Ken Krueger is leaning into Indigenous faith, and he works with the Indigenous communities, and I think it's important to respect it as that. So it's not magical realism. It's not supernatural. It is their worldview. There you go. So, and that leads to this whole thing, and we have like disappearing Indigenous women and disappearing non-Indigenous women and all sorts of stuff going on. I'm not going to go any further than that because read the book. It was good. It was an A book for me. So probably not my favorite Cork O'Connor book though. My biggest problem with this book was I felt the cast was a little bloated. As I said, we follow all his children, and then in this book, so Jenny, his oldest daughter, is married, and she's adopted Wabu. His middle daughter, Annie, comes back from working in Guatemala. Is that right? Guatemala. And she has brought someone with her. And his son, the youngest one, Stephen, is going to be getting married. So we also have his fiance. So you have a really big family group there. And you also have, it's just a really big family group. I'm trying to be careful because I don't want to spoil plots of previous books when I talk about this, because it's a series. And I really felt like there were too many people. We not only have the family, we have some different people from different law enforcement agencies. And when I say it's bloated, I really mean this group of people, because there's, other parts, obviously, but this group of people, there were too many. And for example, Stephen and his fiancée, Annie has come back for their wedding, and Stephen and his fiancée are barely in this book. I barely get to know them. We actually have met, I think, in the previous book, his fiancée. And I found that a little frustrating. But, that's not really that big of a deal. I will say I kind of sobbed at the end of this book. Yeah, it's a sad one. That's all I will say about that. I do recommend it. I do recommend the whole Cork O'Connor series. You do need to read it in order. Although you have 2 places you can start. You can go watch that video to see where it is. But yes, this has been the week of William Ken Krueger. And I have already read Spirit Crossing. It was good. Recommend it. So he usually comes out with books in August or September, so I have another year to wait. Oh, and that kind of brings me up another thing I was thinking about. I don't know if next year he's coming out with another Cork O'Connor book or a standalone, but I have decided that I am going to take July, August, September, one of those at some point during that. I'm just going to start rereading his standalones kind of in order. So I talked about this last week. I read his first, what I consider of his standalones, Ordinary Grace. So next year, if he comes out with a Cork O'Connor book, I will read This Tender Land. If he comes out with a standalone, I'll read that one instead, and then follow it up with The River We Remember, and just kind of cycle through them that way, because I really do love his books. And I'm also thinking I might go back and start doing his Cork O'Connor series on audio, just because I really enjoy them. And I own Iron Lake, the copy of Iron Lake, because I gave it to my father-in-law for Yola Bokafled, and he read it, but then he left the book here. And then I own the ebooks of the later ones, but the big chunk in the middle I don't actually own. So, I can get them off Libro or Audible or Libby, whatever. And I think I might just do that and start cycling through them again, just to do it. Anyway, that's my week. I'm babbling. I kind of feel like the big decision my husband had to make has been made, and I can exhale, and I need to get back to my reading because I got to finish that one book so I can send it on and then finish everything else. But anyway, I will let you all go. Like, subscribe, join my Discord down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.